The information shared on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While we discuss topics related to mental health, well-being, and emotional support, we are not providing therapy or medical services. Always seek the advice of your physician, psychologist, psychiatrist, or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. If you are in crisis, feeling unsafe, or need immediate support, please contact a mental health professional or emergency services in your area. The views expressed by guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of any affiliated organizations or institutions.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A and the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking, thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A on Twitter and Instagram at M.A.Y.A_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A at M.A.Y.A_Akai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 72 of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. I am so excited because this is the Ambition shows that launched in August. This is our fourth guest, and everybody has been nothing short of amazing. And we have another amazing guest today on the show, Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison, who's a clinical psychologist, trauma expert, and you're going to be like one of the most amazing authors you probably have ever met and yet to read, but you're going to read it after this. So as you know, when you check into the M.A.Y.A show, the podcast is focused on embracing what I feel are very salient topics. But more importantly, when we talk about mental wellness, we want to talk about it from a fresh and forward-thinking perspective. You know, my goal is to normalize it. Just like we normalize talking about diabetes or cholesterol, guess what? I want to normalize us talking about anxiety or depression because it's an organ just like anything else. And this one up here does a lot more work than most people give it credit for. It doesn't just do the thinking, it runs everything. And it's also responsible for how you think, feel, act, and so on and so forth. So if you are a first-time listener or viewer, welcome. I always say buckle up for safety because occasionally it can be an unexpected bumpy ride. And I say that because here we like to have like very serious conversations. And, you know, myself or my guests may say something that makes you go, things that make you go, If you're old enough, you know that song. If you're not, you don't, but it's okay. All the same, if you are, of course, a returning listener or viewer, then you know what we do here. I encourage everybody, go grab that space to yourself. It's nice and quiet. Grab a piece, a pencil, a pen, whatever it is you like to use, a piece of paper, notebook, and jot down some thoughts you might have. Because like I said, something might pop up and you may say, I never really thought about that. I want to reflect on it more. And as we move through the show, you may not capture everything. So this is the fourth installment of the Ambition show, as I talked about, and all the guests have been amazing. So if you missed any of the other episodes, don't fear. You can always find episodes of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, iTunes, the Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify, wherever there's a podcast platform. All you have to do is search M.A.Y.A, M.A.Y.A, and boom, you're going to find all the episodes there. Of course, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and just subscribe and share the YouTube channel, M.A.Y.A Speaks to You, because once you subscribe, boom, it's always going to alert you when an episode is coming up, and then you don't have to miss a single episode. So M.A.Y.A Speaks to You. And by the way, I have finally caught up with the times. All of my social media handles are the same. It's M.A.Y.A Speaks to You. It only took me about 3 years to get there, but here I am. Everything is a shared platform. But of course, you can make life easy for yourself. You could always just go to my website, which is www.mayaspeaks.com, and all things M.A.Y.A are there. Two things I really love that's on my website is, one, there is an inspirational blog. I only post something once a week, because I want to give you a thought and I really want you to process it. So it's not daily. So I put things up on Wednesday so you can go anytime during the week and, process it, chew it up, whatever you want to do with it. But it's always thought provoking. But the other side of it that I really love is my menopause blog. Anyone who knows me by now knows that I am the poster child for menopause. There are 36 symptoms, and I probably have had at least 30. I'm not joking. So I love my menopause blog because it shares a lot of really good information for women. It's called Me on Pause. Get it? A play on words, menopause. So if you happen to be in menopause, perimenopausal, if you're hitting that 40 range, guess what? You might want to check my blog out because there's some good stuff on there. Get social with me though, because then you'll know when I post something. You can find me on X and IG and Facebook. It's all Maya Speaks to You. So as I mentioned, August launched the Ambition shows, and these shows are dedicated to introducing you to people you should know because they are the embodiment of what passion and purpose look like when they intersect. And guess what? When they are totally pushed forward by ambition. So we have a great guest, but I want to set up our next guest so you can make sure you're there. If you happen to be a person who is struggling with ADHD, you definitely want to check in next Saturday at 2 p.m. for Ron Sowers because he is an amazing advocate for ADHD. He's a coach and he also hosts his own podcast. Don't mind me, I just have ADHD. And boy, do we know ADHD is something that can be highly disruptive to your life, one, if you're really not taking care of it. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into meeting our next guest. Like I said, she's the she's our fifth guest to be on. Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison. She's a clinical psychologist, trauma expert, and like I said, going to be one of the most amazing authors that you will read. But here's the thing. She is so passionate about what she does. She is the founder of So Wise Solution. And she has spent her professional career as a psychologist studying and treating trauma disorders. And I'm going to say for most people who have in therapy, if you're a therapist, trauma tends to be front and center for us even before we come to realize that. Everybody has had something that has impacted them in a way that it usually looks like a form of trauma that they themselves do not identify. Well, Dr. Harrison has really devoted her life and created those opportunities to learn. She's done research on PTSD at UCLA, their Neuropsychiatric Institute. But the thing that I love, she's so passionate about what she does and informing and shaping and helping people to understand how trauma impacts their life. So she's worked with trauma survivors. She's also near-death experiences. See that right there for some people would probably go, oh, wow, that's different. But if you've ever met someone who's ever had that experience, it's really deep. She also works with DID and PTSD, as I said. So her creativity and passion is amazing. And the story you're about to hear, it all to me came together with this one person she encountered. And it's amazing. So without further ado, let's bring on our next guest, Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison. Welcome to Maya. How are you?
Great. I'm so happy to be talking with you again.
Yes, yes. Our first conversation, as most people should know, I always talk to all my guests before I bring them on because I need to be aware of what they do. I don't do things blindly. A lot of times when you actually see maybe podcasts or shows on TV, Kirsten, you probably know, like you've never talked to the person before. So it's kind of like flying blind, which is not wrong. I mean, I've done that in radio. I had to do that when I worked in radio, but I like to hear someone's story. So before we jump into talking about the book you wrote, I Am Shauna, which is so amazing. Tell us a bit about your journey. Like what led you to be a clinical psychologist?
Okay, long story. I'm pushing 60, so we're going back like 40 years. My high school sweetheart at the time, unbeknownst to me, had been, when we went on our first date, we were in this nice little private school. Everybody kind of, was at the country club and whatever. And then all of a sudden we go on this first date and he tells me he had been an orphan in Bogota, Colombia until he was 5 years old. A beautiful, wonderful, well-meaning family adopted him. And he proceeded to tell me so many things that had happened that were so outside of my sphere of understanding, and then as the course of our relationship progressed, he eventually became my first husband. I was with him for 16 years. So I got a front row seat to, complex PTSD and severe trauma and all of its manifestations. And I also got such an impetus to wanting to be able to help and understand and solve some of these soul level deep problems that come from a little kid just trying to make their way in the world and trying to understand all of this, complexity and uncertainty. So I will say that got me to switch my major when I went to college. I was at Georgetown and I was studying languages, and I thought, I really want to study psychology. I really want to understand further what people are going through. And that just one thing led to another. And then a few years in, when I was 22, my brother tragically died in a boating accident, and he was 20 at the time. And so that propelled my thinking to a whole nother like stratosphere of trying to understand the much bigger questions of what are our meaning and purpose in this life, and how do we put all these traumatic experiences together and hold them in a much bigger, safer space. And that's when I started interviewing a lot of near-death experiencers. I started digging deep into the research, which wasn't that easy to find back in the day. Went to some conferences through the International Association of Near-Death Studies, which is still like incredible. IANS. I would encourage anybody to go and find their conferences and research. And I just started getting more and more heartened by the struggles that people went through, but also their survival and their strength and their resilience and the ability to bounce back from horrendous situations. And I really started to believe that those who had kind of clinically gone to the edge of what we might call sanity also came back with incredible gifts for humanity. And so
Mhm.
it just broadened my landscape, and consequently I've worked 35 plus years in the trauma field, and really it's just about expanding the conversation. That was
Yes,
my
I mean,
long-winded synopsis.
well, it's great, but what's interesting is most people who land within our respective field, there is a story that has led them down that path. There is usually
Yes,
an experience that they've had that says,
yes,
I feel like this is something I would want to do. The
yes.
field of psychology is a very complex field,
Oh
In
yeah.
fact, I would say, working in the field might be more complicated than the medical field because there's nothing that is always sure about working within mental health. Even
Yes,
diagnosing someone, finding the right medication. It's complicated. So
yes.
when people choose to do this field, and I love, and you probably have heard this as you sat in therapy with people, and they'll say, I know this is just your job. It's like,
Mm.
you're absolutely correct. It technically is my job. I said, but ask yourself this question. So anybody who struggles with the idea of therapy should really revisit this. Do you think
Yeah.
anybody would want to sit every day in their life and process other people's issues and problems to help them solve them? I don't think people realize how much you carry when you decide
Yes.
that you want to be an advocate for someone finding peace and mental well-being.
Ah, that is so beautifully stated and so true, because compassion fatigue is real. It was hard when I was raising kids. I did need to take a break for many years with private clients, because I felt I couldn't do them justice, because I was holding back, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting more vicariously traumatized around my children then. And then I was trying to protect my children. It just became this kind of, okay, I think I need to take a break and just go completely into kidland for a while and not have flashbacks of other people's trauma come into my environment right now. But that being said, everything I learned from my kids and their capacity to find joy in this way that they handled their struggles, then eventually was able to be brought back to my trauma clients and say, you know what? Even though you didn't have that same experience as a child, feeling safe and feeling loved and secure, you also learned all of these adaptive things that life brought you at an earlier age. Like maybe some people don't learn till they're 70 or 80. Look at how far along you are. So it was kind of this
Mhm.
wonderful, beautiful melding when I was able to get back to doing therapy with people.
When you talk about trauma, and this is something that I have noticed being working as a crisis worker for 15 years in an ER and then
Mhm.
doing, private practice. It's interesting the amount of people who one truly do not understand what trauma is because
Mhm.
often they have been exposed to it. It has shaped their lives, but we
Yeah.
normalize trauma so much within our respective society. And a lot
Mhm.
of people don't get it that trauma often it's done in three different ways. It often starts when you are
Mhm.
introduced to the world, you are put into a family, and there could be
Mhm.
standing trauma. So now you have that, and then
Mhm.
you carry that within yourself. So now you have it individually. But we also have trauma that exists at a higher level that's even socially. And we've
Yes.
normalized so many things. And I've met people
Mhm.
that have had very traumatic things happen, and they'll just say, "Well, that was just how things were. That's how my
Mhm.
family did things. That was life." And it says,
Yeah.
"Well, everything that people do isn't correct. You realize that, right?" And then
Yeah.
there's kind of like that blank stare because the first thing that's hard for people to accept is if trauma is rooted within childhood of their family, processing
Yeah.
that because the
Yeah.
truths you have to come to can be hard. How have you, when you've noticed working with people with trauma, do you find they really minimize it? And does that surprise you?
It kind of goes both ways. I mean, sometimes when I worked inpatient with a lot of people with DID with very severe kind of internal splitting, a lot of times they would come up with either a very fantastical memory that was so out there, but really it was a screen memory to cover a more mundane situation for them, which was dad came into my room at night and molested me. That was much more of a difficult thing for them to process than this crazy extreme scene they might have set up for other people in the hospital, because there was a disconnect there. So that's one mechanism. And then other mechanisms, as you're saying, in the attempt to normalize, well, I just grew up like that and everybody else did, there's this shutting down and complete dissociation from their own experience. And so there's kind of this middle ground where you want to make sure that people feel safe and they don't have to go so extreme to be heard or seen, or self-mutilating or whatever it is. But on the other hand, understanding that, like Bessel van der Kolk says, the body keeps the score, and that somehow we're always trying to have this trauma understood, even if we can't verbally or cognitively recognize that.
And
Yeah.
that right there is, I think, the part that is really starting to emerge, especially within the field, is people beginning to accept that trauma sits deeper in the
Hmm.
body than just a memory. We're knowing
Yeah.
that it's literally at the cellular level. Hence, there are new therapies that are coming out to help people to be able to release those things. And I think
Oh yeah.
most people, if you ask
Mhm.
them, trauma is not just this independent experience. You hold that so tight when something really ultimately shapes the way you think and feel, and often not for the best.
Yes, and you are touching upon, I mean, a lot of people are really swearing by somatic experiencing, that kind of therapy where it really gets to the somatic level, and then being able to also realize the beauty is that we can control some of those innate physiological responses, like a startle reflex and PTSD, hyperarousal, whatever it is, that you're able to practice deep breathing, feeling into the heart, feeling into the body. So there are ways that we can access some of that buried trauma and the epigenetic trauma that's been passed down through generations that we are not aware of either. But I will also, because it's my personality, I will also highlight the strength and resilience and all of that. So whatever's been embedded deeply is also given our bodies at that cellular level the ability to start adapting and to start being resilient. And so I will say that I will always look for the strengths in survival and always kind of promote the post-traumatic growth and thriving that comes from all of that.
So, with that being said, let's do
Mhm.
that lateral shift and talk about Shauna, because I feel like this book is so
Yeah.
amazing, but I also feel like for you, it had to be this experience. Did it bring so many things together that you had been doing? It seems like, how you can lead up to something,
Yeah.
and then that moment
Yeah.
happens. You're like, this was probably what I was born to do. This was supposed to
Yes.
be part of what I was supposed to help manifest and bring into the world. So tell us the story
Yes.
of Shauna, because it embodies three things that, for my listeners, you're going to know about some
Uh-huh.
of this and some of it's you're not. One, it talks about, obviously, gender. That's one piece. Then
Uh-huh.
it talks about, obviously, mental health, because there was schizophrenia, and then there's
Mhm.
homelessness, which is
Yeah.
obviously, a financial and social dynamic. So three different things
Yes.
came into play when you met
Yeah.
Shauna. So tell us the story of Shauna.
Okay. So behind me, if you can see that picture, that is Shauna. And we had just moved to La Jolla, California, which was just this quaint little seaside community of really wonderful people. And my ex-husband, but my husband at the time, was originally from Trinidad. He's been in America since he was 13, but he's so Trinidadian American, long dreadlocks, and a professional tennis player that traveled the world, had a big tennis academy, and coached at the majors. And so we noticed that Sean at the time was just always hanging out at the tennis courts. And Sean, 6'5", African American, very muscular, collegiate athlete. I said to my ex-husband, maybe you guys should catch a match sometime. Just go play tennis. And so we were getting settled. And then all of a sudden, one time we went to the grocery store, and all of a sudden, Shauna appeared. Blonde, curly wig, pink bikini top, little skirt. And I was like, huh, okay, didn't expect that. What's going on here? So over time, I did observe her enough to start to see that there were maybe some mental struggles, some little bit of distress and agitation, and also observe just this preternatural like positivity and just incredible optimism, Everyone in the community knew her. Everybody loved her. And so there was only one caveat, that when she was having some extreme kind of like delusional outbursts and getting really agitated in her body, she would also kind of shout really loudly. So it would kind of look like this on the streets and be a little scary to some people. So I kind of started making it my mission to educate people. Hey, if you just say, "Hey, Shauna," in a friendly voice, she'll sort of snap out of it and all will be well. So that was kind of part of the first part of just maybe using my skills as a psychologist to maybe educate people around her, like the people at the Starbucks or the people at the grocery store. So then one night I was at the grocery store really late, probably ran out of dog food, can't remember why I was there so late. And she was standing there in the freezing, pelting rain, shivering. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, she might be homeless. Like, does she not have somewhere to go? And so I said, would you like me to put you up at a hotel for a night? Would you like shelter? And she said, oh, yes, ma'am. And she gestured to the heavens, and just gratitude, almost looked like she was about to fall to her knees. And she was like, bless, like, thank you. So that started a long journey of calling the newspaper, starting a GoFundMe, putting her up in a million different hotels till I could figure out what I was doing. But I knew I couldn't turn back. I promised her, you know what? You're never going to be on the streets again. And somehow, through the grace of God, I was able to deliver on that promise. I don't know what gave me strength and impetus and vision, but it all constellated, as you said, in this one situation. And for 10 years now, she's been housed, and she now lives in Palm Springs. She spent the last 7 years there to just sort of have some downtime. She walks a half marathon a day to manage her mental distress. When the symptoms come up late at night, she can kind of release it to the air. It is an incredible mood walk therapy for her. She's been able to manage her symptoms medication free. That was it. For her, it was an unacceptable risk to her body, some of the side effects. And it's just been a wonderful journey. We text 10,000 times a day. I sent her on her first flight after 17 years not being on a plane, taught her how to text, and now she's a social media queen with 1 million views on TikTok. So it's just been an incredible journey. And then I will address one more part. So she is what they call intersex. And this took her a long time, a lot of years of confusion to figure out. She eventually got the diagnosis. It's where you have kind of ambiguous genitalia. And from my understanding, it's sort of like the old term hermaphrodite, and it's not as cut and dry, but it's, trying to tease that apart with also her mental illness, and trying to figure out where the truth lay, kind of thing. And she said she always knew something was different. She was very confused growing up. She had a very Christian home, and they just didn't really talk about things like this. Her stepfather was a pastor, but she grew to understand over time that things weren't quite like everybody else. And finally, the homeless outreach team in San Diego took her to the Gay and Lesbian Center. Then they did a few examinations, put her in an intersex support group, and then voila, she's finally at some sort of peace and understanding with who she is. And she now spends her time advocating for intersex rights, advocating to stop intersex surgeries, which she's very grateful that her parents didn't have to make that really difficult choice when she was younger. And we just spent 3 weeks in Europe. She'd never left the country. We spent 3 weeks in Europe going around to the Euro Pride Parade, the Paris Pride, London Pride. And she advocated and spoke about, what it's like to live kind of in the margins and in between, and how you find peace with that. So.
And that's right there. That's so much. I mean, you set Shauna on this path to be able to gain the understanding that it seems like for all of her life that it was just it was unclear. And the thing about, for instance, like homelessness, like you didn't initially realize that homelessness was part of the equation. But you shared some information earlier, and I'm like, I always say to people that no one wants to be homeless. There's always a story. And when you shared the background, I was like, that's par for course. Everybody has this story that has led them down the path. So how did Shauna end up in homelessness?
So she was homeless for 8 years, sleeping on cardboard. It started, she has a 4-year college degree as a PE teacher, but things did start to unravel a little for her in college in terms of she was on the basketball team on a scholarship. And another part of the story, she actually founded some of the basketball things at Christian Heritage College, and so she was doing great. And then, as what often happens with especially schizophrenia, which I've sort of in my mind diagnosed her as dissociative schizophrenia, which I could get into that in a little bit. But I remember I'm her friend and I'm not her psychologist, but just everything inside me with all my training kind of over time, I would sort of say, does this feel right to you, Shauna? And we would go work through it. And so, she was working 70 hours at the Boys and Girls Club, and she was just feeling like she was spinning out of control. And she said, just like a car that runs out of gas, one day I just stopped. And what's apparent to me is that some of the internships she had in the schools, maybe she was starting to not be able to teach in front of the kids as easily. So the mental illness was starting to become apparent. And I've also talked to some of the friends that she had back in that time, and they've concurred with that it was just enough to guide her to the mental health center. So then she just stopped being able to pay her bills, which of course then is a scary slippery slope. She started living in her car. And then she said one day her car just got towed, and she said, just like that, Doc, I ended up on the streets. And it was scary. It was very scary. And it took her a while to adjust and to get through like the despair and the fear and whatever. But sure enough, in true Shauna fashion, which is why she is so inspiring, she said, I just started waking up each day curious. I wonder what today's going to bring. She said, I always knew something was going to work out for me in the end. I didn't know how, but I showed up every day, kept myself clean, went to the beach showers. People started collecting at the recreation center here locally, little shampoo things from hotels, little things of toothpaste. And so she just kept going on her routine, and she started doing a bunch of errands for businesses. If they'd give her a pizza out the back, she might bring the manager's, shopping cart over to the grocery store to get a bunch of, let's say, waters for the company. And she'd walk 3 miles with the shopping cart to go deliver. So she started creating community and being neighborly in a way that was just incredible given her circumstances.
So you said diagnosed with schizophrenia, and that piece.
Uh-huh.
So the thing I want people to
Yes.
note about that is you had a person who had a life, had a future,
Yes.
potential,
Yes.
opportunity, enter mental health. And for
Yes.
some people, it can be highly disruptive. And it's interesting because
Yes.
it sounds like, what was the support like for Shauna? Was there a disconnect with family at that point? Had she kind of separated away?
So I'll start with one of the beauties of this story is that I have reconnected her with, her sister and some family. Now, Shauna is still very sort of at arm's length because she was very prideful when she was homeless, and her identity was confusing. And so there are times that her sister has told me that she would come to visit and it was starting to peek through, and she would maybe wear kind of an extremely flamboyant outfit. And then that scared her sister because of her kids. So there was a little bit of backstory of just sort of like everybody just trying to get by and make it, because it's, we're not talking families that come from like a ton of opportunity. However, her family was quite remarkable, and they did send part of a trip I took with Shauna out east is we retraced her whole life. And so we went through, she did go to an amazing private school in Columbia, Maryland. They were the only Black family, and she excelled. She got amazing kind of opportunities. But again, systemically, things were stacked against her. And then in her family of origin, it was like everybody was just trying to get by and move forward, and things were falling through the cracks. And so her sister did say that she noticed some differences early on, which I would point to maybe starting this planting the seeds of schizophrenia in her neurology. Some, medial prefrontal cortex things. I mean, things were a little bit different than they were for other people. There was a little bit of purposeful planning that started to fall apart. There were moments of maybe like some catatonic kind of like states that were like her sister just thought she was sort of zoning out. Now it's confusing because in dissociation, the same thing happens when someone's had a lot of severe trauma. As you know, like with kids, teachers will think they're zoning out when actually they're just sort of like elsewhere because of trauma. It's a split. But to get back to the story, her sister and I have a great relationship where we're kind of, I'm like the go-between between Shauna and the family now. And so I'll post comments and pictures to the sister, and then she'll give me more backstory. But honestly, there wasn't anything crazy like identifiable that would cause such a difficult downward slope. But I think once you're stuck in a situation where you are living on the streets, it becomes such formidable, like the obstacles are incredible to being able to start to get it back together, that unless you have an ally or someone powerful to come in and say, hey, I'm going to walk you through every step of this, and even with that it's difficult. It can get kind of hopeless kind of quickly. And that's why it's so important for all of us. Take a chance on people, connect with people, try to hear their stories and see what maybe you could offer, to lend them a little strength, because you just never know, right?
Mm-hmm. There was a study that was done, I want to say back in 2023, and it
Mm-hmm.
said that roughly, it's an estimate within the US that 67% of people that are homeless have mental health issues. So just think, and that's what people really need to understand, is that no
Yeah.
one generally chooses to be homeless. There's something that puts them there. And there's a lot of factors to
Yes.
it. So, and you think
Yes.
about it, and the breakdown that was interesting is that
Mhm.
schizophrenia is one of the leading diagnoses that places
Yes.
people there, as well as
Yeah.
bipolar and
Mm-hmm.
substance abuse. Those three things are
Yes.
usually the top kind of issues that play into when people end up in homelessness. And it's interesting. So Shauna went from living in Maryland, and then she's across the country. I mean, but
Yeah.
as you hear the story though, this was a person who had a future, who had a life,
Yes.
who had opportunity. And then
Yes.
enters the mental health issue, and all of that spiraled very quickly. So talk a bit about schizophrenia, because I'll be honest, it is definitely one of those mental health disorders that most people truly do not understand.
Well, okay, so this will date me, but when I was back at Georgetown and I was 18, 19, back in DC, was when Ronald Reagan had done all that deinstitutionalization, where all of a sudden all the people who had been cared for in the mental facilities were now on the streets. And I remember very distinctly, there's a place in DC called DuPont Circle. And I
Yes.
remember all of a sudden I started
Mhm.
seeing all these people doing some really interesting behaviors that I had just learned about in my psych class. And so that was part of starting to see the effects of how the disorders that you mentioned are very biologically based. They're the most biologically based of all the mental disorders. So it would make sense how they end up on the streets, because there's not a huge capacity to always be able to help themselves in the way that we would commonly say, hey, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You got this. It's like it's a very different challenge when it's coming from, different signals in the brain. And I will say also, on this trip with Shauna, I had a bird's eye view, I mean, whatever you would call it, when you're right there with somebody, I guess not a bird's eye view. I had a view right next to her for 3 weeks straight, which is the most time we'd ever spent like in that close proximity. To seeing how things got difficult. Like we would be walking somewhere and all of a sudden she would just start screaming at different voices, and then she would catch herself a little bit and she'd kind of go to play it off, or and I thought that that was actually growth, that she was able to sort of step outside and realize, okay, I got to conform a little here. I have to act a little more appropriately. Like to me that was growth. But one time I looked at her deep in her eyes. We were sitting in Paris at the Galerie Lafayette, which is a beautiful department
Mhm.
store. And I
Mhm.
just stared deep into her eyes and I said, Shauna, it's exhausting to watch what you're going through. Like, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm watching you basically like being attacked by something that you're always on the defense from. And she looked right back at me and said, Doc, you have no idea. It is trying. And then she just popped right back up with, but I get through it. I, make the best of it. And so I was like, there is a human being way deep inside there, no matter who you're dealing with, that has a deep awareness. And I would call it maybe the soul, like really understanding, yeah, I'm kind of trapped in a little something here, but how do I choose to respond to what's going on? You know?
That that piece you said right there is the thing. If you take any nugget away from this, is the thing I want people to learn about when people struggle with their mental health, is that
Mhm.
there is a person in there. And
Yes.
that person is often fighting to get out, but it's not
Yes.
easy. And
Yeah.
I think it's so easy for people to judge when they see homeless people or people who are struggling and things and think, oh,
Mhm.
they can just change that. Well, if it was that easy, clap on,
Mhm.
we'd have it resolved. And when you
Yeah.
describe the 80s, I'm going to date myself too.
Yeah.
I clearly remember as a kid growing up in Illinois, I
Uh,
remember when they closed almost all of the mental health institutions in Illinois. Like there were three of them.
uh,
And the thing
yeah.
is, I would and understand this, they closed the facilities with no action plan for the people they were releasing. So instantly,
Exactly.
homelessness was just created because most of these people had no family. They had lost contact with, I mean, they had no support. So
Mhm.
literally, we
Yeah.
took people that we knew were mentally and emotionally debilitated, and we put them on the streets. And the thing is,
Yes.
and from that point within this country, homelessness has continued to grow. But I don't think people
Yeah.
realize the boost that it really got was like those late 80s, so to speak,
Yeah.
is when
Yeah.
homelessness really got a boost because we released, we're talking thousands, hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
mentally ill people into the world with no resources, which means no more medication. We're talking about
Yeah.
you have them medicated as you had them institutionalized. Hence, you
Mhm.
release them with no medication, no follow up care. What do we think was going to happen to them?
Well, exactly, and you have the same exhausted families that were powerless, clueless, didn't have any idea how to cope with the struggles that this person who clearly needed help had, but then at least if they were somewhere, which I'm not gonna speak to how difficult it must have been living in an institution, that must be horrible.
Mhm.
However, at least as you said, there's medication management, hopefully some meals, hopefully a bed, hopefully all of this and the families all of a sudden are like, we don't know what to do. And then the family member is usually just then lost to the streets. What happened, how we connected with Shauna's sister, was that her niece had always realized that her mom was feeling this super deep pain about what happened to my brother. Did he die? What happened? I haven't heard from him in all these years.
Mhm.
And somehow, by the fact that we did the GoFundMe and then it got local coverage and then the San Diego Tribune and whatever, her sister was her niece was googling something and then told her mom, oh my gosh, I think I found my uncle. And then through that article, because I had said this wonderful landlord named Lou, and somehow I thought I was doing Lou a favor by kind of plugging his business. Turns out he was like, okay, I got too many calls from people saying, can you give me housing? But that's how the sister was then able to contact the landlord, who then contacted me, then I called the sister, and then that's how the connection was made. But we're talking families that are severed by mental illness and severed by the whole institution of how do we protect people who are most vulnerable. That's what we need to remember. These are vulnerable adults. And back in the 80s, there was a guy named Mitch Schneider, and he made it his mission to stick up for the homeless. And he eventually suicided, sadly, because the whole thing just became so overwhelming. It's like there are tents outside of the White House and nothing was happening. And so it just, I mean, it's a pervasive issue. I would say it's the same thing with substance abuse. Nobody
Yeah.
tries to end up on the street
No,
addicted. I
no,
mean,
no.
no, that's not the vision people have for their lives, but you have series of traumas and then you have the brain kicking in, addiction kicking in, taking on a life of its own, and pretty soon there you are. And fed up families or frustrated families or families who just don't know. And then also again, I will keep going back to everybody's just trying to make it. Life can be hard. And so they don't necessarily have time to stop their life and like see, oh, how's my brother doing right now? It just sometimes that's just it's not possible when they're trying to raise kids.
And one of the things that I recently have had conversations with people, and current theme that keeps surfacing, and I find it very sad, is that there are so many people that legitimately are just one step away from being homeless. Most people don't
Mhm.
realize the step before full blown homelessness that I have seen with a lot
Mm,
of people is living in motels. That is
yes,
something that for me in
yeah,
working as a crisis worker in the ER, it floored me how
mhm,
many people, like families, we're talking 10 people sometimes in
yeah,
one hotel room.
ugh,
And that's their way of trying to just be able to have some type of stable housing because
yeah,
one, the cost of housing has gone up exponentially. Often when most people
mhm,
need to be able to even rent something, they don't have Like, for instance, they don't have the credit history. They maybe don't have the first month or last month rent, all these things that they're being asked
Yeah.
for. And to be honest, public housing within the country cannot accommodate everybody
No.
who
Yeah.
needs.
You'll laugh right now, or not laugh. It's actually horrible. But to your point, we've been trying for years. My dad used to say, you can't support her for the rest of your life. I was like, I will die trying. I cannot handle the thought of her ever being homeless. And we've got things in place now with writing the book and whatever. That won't be the case. I will make sure she's always going to be okay. However, even trying to get like food stamps, like EBT, she qualified, I think, at one point when she was unhoused for $140 a month. That was it. And she was
That's
unhoused
it.
and mentally ill. That's it. It's not like when people say, oh, there's services for that. Well, really? Because I found that through my work with Shauna, all of a sudden it was like all the homeless grapevine, everybody was seeking me out in the community. It was a little overwhelming at first. And I was trying to get this woman connected with some services that had a dog, and they were like, nope, we can't help her. She has a dog. I said, you understand this dog is everything to her. It's the last thing she has from her old
Yeah.
life. It protects her from all sorts of assault at night on the streets. No way is she going to part with this dog. And yet they were like, nope, sorry. And so the obstacles are just gigantic. And so even with an advocate, I went to a local physician to try to get some of her. Shauna at one point had been in the military. She'd been in the Navy. At another point, she had been in she'd just been and worked with all these different places. And I was like, she's got to have some benefits out there somehow. And so we tried to get her student loans kind of forgiven through this military program. And again, living on the streets for 8 years after somebody who had very diligently completed college, also taken out a few loans. She had basketball scholarship, but she made up the difference with loans. She diligently paid those off up until the point where she landed in her car. And they, even with my signatures, trying to go in and get another medical doctor's signatures, no, nobody would cooperate. So when people think, okay, they can easily change their situation. No, it is
No.
not easy. And we all need to help. We all need to show up as advocates. We need to ally. I'm not suggesting that everybody go out and just go maybe do the Shauna story like I did, because
Right.
I definitely was aware that she had already made a lot of friendships in the community and people very much vouched for her. It wasn't like I was just blindly going, okay, because that can be dangerous, especially for young people if they hear that message. However, take a chance, do what you can, find a way to try to find some common understanding or something that ties your maybe expertise or passion to somebody else and see where that can go. I mean, it's quite remarkable when you give it a chance.
And the thing is, it's the little things. There's a person within my local
Yes.
community that created what's called portable pantries. So
Yes.
throughout the city, like by bus stops, common places, are these little, they look like little houses. They're like about 3 or 4 feet high, and they're stocked on a regular basis with non-perishable foods. So anybody who's homeless can walk up to this portable pantry and they can pull out, some like soup that, with a pop top or
Yeah.
anything that's, that will not, spoil or waste. And they're
Yeah.
throughout the city. And the thing is, you've got people who then volunteer to collect the food. You have people then who have taken it upon themselves to to take ownership of one of the pantries and make sure it's always filled. It's the little things
Yes.
that can make a difference. And that's something simple that puts a meal on somebody's plate.
And that's huge. I mean, after all of this was happening, I knew Shauna's story. We would go back to the different places and sort of say, hey, like, thank you so much. We featured you in the book. And one of them was a local fish shop that gave her clam chowder every night. And Shauna said, the warmth of the chowder fed my soul. It kept my soul warm. And it was like they had no idea that a simple little offering of a cup of clam chowder every night was hugely momentous to Shauna. And it also gave her a purpose and felt like she had a sense of belonging. So yeah, we can all do that and start in your neighborhood, start in your community. There are countless myriad ways to be able to make those differences that actually matter so much. And that's a huge theme of the book, is how the community rallied. But Shauna also constantly availed herself of everything, but also made herself useful and productive by trying to help. If a neighbor always had trash on the porch, Shauna would say, hey, can I move that over to that dumpster for you. And it just started to become a little habit. Pretty soon there was $5 that was on the porch for a thank you. And it would just be kind of like these little acts of kindness that just keep everybody moving along. We're all interconnected.
Little acts of kindness. It's just
Yes.
sometimes that simple. And the other cliche thing is charity starts at home. So
Yes.
you don't have to do
Yeah.
these big, like global things that people assume. Start within your community. Maybe you volunteer at a food pantry. You help make sure that people donate. A lot of times toiletries, all those things like make a difference. That's one of the
Yeah.
things. We had people that would create like little personal bags and give them to the hospital ER. So when people would come in homeless,
Oh,
the bag had all these like things that you would need, and we always passed them out to people. We collected
yes.
clothes. So people would come in
Yes.
sometimes and we would
Mhm.
give people shoes and jackets because people donated it. And it's just something small. So clean out your
Yeah.
closet. If you got 10 coats
Yes.
and you're not wearing them, go donate it to a closet because somebody could use it. So, okay,
Absolutely.
we know about Shauna. So
Okay.
how did you get the
Uh-huh.
idea of the book, and how did you collaborate with Shauna to write the book? I'm sure it had to have its challenges.
It was very challenging. So I will say I was a little like, your whole show is about ambition. So I was a little over ambitious at first because so what happened was the first year, the GoFundMe, we got her off the street and it paid for all her housing and expenses. Then we found an angel investor and they were incredible. So the second year was covered. By the third year, I started to panic like, oh my gosh, like what are we going to do? I think the community is kind of going, okay, like what's Sean up to next? But there wasn't the same kind of impetus or drive to maybe like donate. So I was thinking, okay, obviously this is going to fall to me now. I'm never going to let her go back on the street. It's going to fall to me. But so I started selling things in my closet, my nice high-end boots, whatever, and I just get her like one more night of something like, food or whatever. And so I said to her, Shauna, your story is so compelling and so many people seem to know you and love you and vice versa. I think we should tell your story. I think we should write a book. And she thought about it and she's like, you know what, Doc, I would love to do that. So what I didn't realize was I had 3 kids that were all in like pre-teen and high school age with all the, activities and whatever. I have 2 stepkids and one of my stepkids is got special needs, Smith-Magenis syndrome. So I had my hands full. So me even suggesting that was kind of like ludicrous. However, I was not going to give up on finding a way to use my skills to maybe find her a way to become self-sufficient. And so I will say that during that time, of course, I'm supporting her. I'm trying to find time to write. Then she decided COVID hit and she had wanted to move to Palm Springs because she thought it would be calmer and more respite and could take a lot of mood walks. So we would text a lot of ideas back and forth. And then I would task her with, hey, Shauna, I need an intro paragraph to this chapter. And I really need your deep thoughts on what it was that you were going through, but just say it how you would say it. So her experiences and thoughts were always synthesized at the beginning of every chapter. And then every single thing that was written, although I wrote the most of it, everything that was written was from countless texts and conversations that I recorded or that I went back and found later screenshots. And that's the story. So it's very much interwoven with Shauna's words and everything she told me about her life and history. And also it's a challenge, but trying to write me into the story because obviously the relationship was part of it too. And I first worked with a publishing partner because I had no idea how to write this kind of book. I'd always written clinical journal type of essays. And she said, you are part of the story. She said, you need to write yourself in as part of the story and how learning together what helped both of you. It became a mutually wonderful story. And the biggest highlight of that was in 2019, I had gotten a diagnosis where they were telling me based on scans that I had a year to live. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I had to tell my kids and my husband at the time. And it ended up after a deep biopsy in my bone that it was something completely different. I have a very rare disease, but hallelujah, it's not that I had a year to live. We're now in 2025. I'm evidence of that. So, but I will say, yeah, thank you. I will say that Shauna showed up for me in every which way known to man, as well as my people that I've been friends with for 40 years. I mean, she was checking in text. She was sending me flowers on the text, like every single day. It was, Doc, okay, how we doing today? And I just thought, you know what? These are the unexpected gifts of taking a chance on someone that are priceless. And who knew that that would happen? So, of course, that is part of why we wrote my story into the book as well, in our friendship, because really it's all about this mutual touching of each other's lives and how we just never know who we're sent on this earth to interact with, and how many synchronicities happen when you just open yourself up to these relationships.
I mean, and that I love how you created that space for Shauna to be able to do something that within its own right could be challenging. Like, how do we
Yeah.
collaborate to write this book? Because it's not necessarily
Yes.
easy. But I like the fact that,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that the publisher pointed out, but you are part of the story. It's like you bring this together to help share. And so I'm glad they
Yeah.
helped you to realize that pretty much you should be included. So with that being said, everybody, guess what? The book has been
Okay.
completed. You finished the book and it was released when?
It was released in May, and we did a book signing locally. And then ever since then, we've been traveling and promoting and doing a lot of things on social media. And the whole thing is really just driving people to the story and the way that her journey progressed. And I feel like using social media to find a way to connect with people and what their curiosities are. Like, a lot of people are very curious about intersex, and finding a way that we can sort of educate, which is Shauna's
Mhm.
passion, educate and coach, also brings people towards the story and then back again. And it kind of starts to weave in a bigger conversation with everybody's input. And I think that is making Shauna feel so heartened that now people are joining a much bigger conversation. But I would say you will find something in the book that will speak to you and resonate with you and give you hope, because ultimately there is so much joy and hope if you just like adopt the right lenses,
Mhm.
if you can, and
Yeah,
in an allyship to be able to really be there for somebody.
be there for somebody. So
Yeah.
everybody, you got to check out the book. So to learn more, obviously, about, Dr. Harrison as well as about Shauna. But by now we should have piqued your interest in this because there's a lot of different moving parts to this story. One, you can always go to the website, which is www.soulwisesolutions.com. There's all things Dr.
Mhm.
Harrison there, as well as a lot of things with Shauna, of course. But we want you to go out and get the book, because that's the key
Yes.
thing. Read the story, learn more about it, kind of really take it in. Because I do believe when people hear these stories, it tends to
Mhm.
open up their eyes that, yeah, everybody who's homeless, no one's choosing this. There's a reason why this is
Yeah.
going on. And you could
Yeah.
very well be the solution to someone. Here's the thing,
Yeah.
we're not going to always solve this just out the gates, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a
Yeah.
process. But we could
Yeah.
individually be a difference maker in someone's life. You'd be surprised. So everybody, make
Yes.
sure you check out I Am Shauna. It's an inspiring story. It talks about homelessness and identity discovery, and it's told through obviously a collaboration with Dr. obviously Harrison. So guess what? Just like everything else in the known world, it's available on Amazon
And
just
Barnes and Noble and whatever.
and wherever. That tends to be, yeah. So if people want to pick up a copy, obviously Amazon. Is it also available on your website as well? Is there like a
Yes, it
preferred
is.
way to purchase it? Like, for instance, if people purchase it through your website, obviously, is that a better outcome financially for the book and for Shauna if they do it that way
I
versus
mean, it
Amazon?
just depends what's easy and convenient for them. The website one has the hardcover copies that are signed. And Shanna and I had a great time signing those, and she just felt so proud. So if you want that copy, for sure, get it through the website. But
Oh, and I'm gonna
otherwise,
give it to everybody.
Amazon.
Don't go to Amazon. Go to soulwisesolutions.com because it's a signed copy. Who doesn't want a good signed
Yeah.
copy? Like, it's so much more
Yeah.
personal. And the thing is, you're buying the book
And
because
there's
you
so
heard this
many
story.
photos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm
and the
gonna say,
photos are really clear in the signed copy. They're very
is it?
well done.
Yes. So I'm gonna say
Good
go to that
quality.
website and purchase the book there. I'm not being
Thank you.
anti-Amazon. I'm just saying I feel like this is more benefit. If people wanted to donate
Oh,
in some way, like they're like, I wouldn't mind
yeah.
giving. Because a lot of times people don't like to give because they feel like, is my money gonna really go where it's supposed to go? And they question it. And we
Yes.
know this is gonna go where it's supposed to go. Can they donate on the
Yeah.
site as well or something like that?
Um, I I'll think about that. I don't know that I have it set up. I think the best way again to kind of donate would be to buy the book and then maybe donate the book to other people. Yeah, I haven't even thought of that before. I just sort of always figured that somehow what Shauna needed was going to appear. But that's a good thought. Maybe we can think about that.
Yeah, just, people might say, hey, because like I said, a lot of times people want to donate, but they just kind of feel a little like,
Yeah.
not sure. And you hear things where things don't go where it's supposed to, or you have
Yes.
poured 10 years plus of your life into this book,
Yeah.
but also this person. So obviously, it's definitely worth, I
Yeah.
think I wouldn't think twice about donating. I'm definitely going to get the book. And you're right, the book does help the cause. So that works that way as
Yes.
well.
That would be
All right.
great. And then also, so we set up an LLC together. So we set up a Shelter for Shauna LLC where everything does help bridge the gap when she needs it. So that the book, definitely all the proceeds of the book go directly into that.
Nice.
I
Very
would
good
say
to
if
hear.
you're looking for a gift for somebody and you want to inspire somebody, that buying the book directly helps Shauna move forward and also helps the message of hope and resilience move forward. And to me, that is like the mission.
Yeah. So everybody, make sure you pick the book up. Like I said, it is on Amazon, but our preference here is to go to soulwisesolutions.com and to pick up the book there, because it can be a nice, actually personalized copy, which you can't beat that. I think that's so much even better, knowing that she took the time, she signed, you signed. It's just so much more special. So everybody check out the book. It's definitely an amazing story, and it's so personal and it's real. It takes the idea of homelessness, mental health, and even most people are not familiar with intersex. In fact, we probably just had an education moment, Kirsten, that most people were probably still saying hermaphrodite because that was the word that has been used forever. Well, guess what? We've graduated past that word. So now it is intersex, and it's something new to learn about. So there's a complexity to her story. This is that runs so deep. So I'm so glad you came on the share. Riley, you want to jump on and share some stuff? She's like, hey, I want to say hi. I've got some stuff to say.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Oh my gosh. That was so beautiful. I love that story of Shauna. It just I love it. I just like how it really just shows like asking for help and receiving help. You just, if you don't ask, you won't receive type of deal. It just I thought that was so inspiring. And I talk about like my journey on here all the time. I'm a recovering addict, and I've experienced like similar things to Shauna, and it just having a positive mindset through the hard times and just believing in yourself. And I just love that she has that too. And I really want to read her book so bad. And yeah, that was great.
Oh, I love that you
Thank
just
you.
shared that too, because honestly, we're always held by something bigger, guided by something bigger. That is just 100% my contention. I've seen it so many times with so many people. And I feel like that's also like the brightness in you. I feel like that is something you're able to resonate with, that somehow we're on a path and we're all on it together. And we have to keep that openness and curiosity no matter our situation.
Yeah, and I love we are all human too. That part just really, people need to really be empathetic and understand that we all have souls. And I kind of think about how we are, like with the mental health aspect, we kind of observe what our brain was wired to do. And sometimes it's tougher for others. And just being true to yourself and knowing like that there's a human inside there is so great. And we all go through it, and it can't happen. It can happen to anyone.
Things. Exactly. That's like the golden nugget. Like anything can happen to anyone. It's like, just stay open. Don't be judgmental. Just come in and say, okay, well, that didn't happen to me this day. So how can I then lend my strength? Because goodness knows we might need it in return, as shown by how Shauna responded to when I got sick. So, I love that you jumped on and said that. That makes me feel really good.
You said it. You said something I think that people need to hear. It's okay to ask for help. Because oftentimes people will not know you're suffering. Because look how long it took for Dr. Kirsten to actually come to realize that Shauna was homeless, because how carrying herself, and it didn't just jump out that there was something that was going on with her. So we can never assume that people are okay. Even though I always say, I've been in places and I've seen someone like not looking okay. I don't know them. And I've actually walked and said, I know I don't know you, but are you okay? because
bless
they
you.
just
Yeah.
looked like they were so broken. And the thing is, it's the small thing. When you walk up to a stranger and they're just having a bad day, they'll be like, wow, I actually appreciate you asked me that. And then
Yeah.
they just actually like said some stuff, or
Yeah.
even with, I know we see a lot of homelessness in the world, and it's often easy to like not want to be bothered at times because you see,
Yeah.
like, especially if someone walks up to your car, and it's hit or miss if people give, but I'll tell you, you'd be surprised how the small things make a difference. Like I was once at a
Yeah.
gas station putting air in my tire,
Yeah.
and this guy walks up, and I didn't like that piece because I was putting air in my tire, so I didn't particularly care
Yeah.
for someone walking up. It's more
Yeah.
of a safety thing. He's like, would you give me $1 if I do that? And I said, no, but if you just go inside the gas station and get some stuff, I'll come in and buy it for you. And he's like, really?
Aw.
And I said, yeah. So here's what was interesting. I finished putting air in my tire. I walk in the gas station. He was standing at the back of the line. The look on his face, he didn't believe I was going to come in and buy the food. He had gotten like one or two. I said, what are you doing? I said, isn't that 2 for 1? I said, well, go get like 4. And like, and don't you need water or something? And he's like, really? And the thing is, the people on the line were just staring at him and me like, what? And he went back and got water and stuff. And I said, I'll pay for it. And people just looked at it. I said, it's the little things that make a difference. And for that man, he was like, thank you so much. I didn't think you were going to come inside. And I was like,
Yeah.
I get it. Because most people probably would tell you that.
But you restored his trust and his dignity by doing that.
And the one thing I think is so important is in that moment, I feel like that man felt like he was seen.
Yes.
Just so often when people are homeless or struggling, they feel so unseen and unheard. So when someone just extends kindness, they're like, wow. Because that's unfortunately, the world is feeling a little harsh right now. So everybody gets the book. Dr. Kirsten, thank you for coming on and sharing your story along with Shauna's story. And I want to encourage everybody, please, 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 go get the book. Remember, I said you can go to the website. It's there. That's why I'm going to encourage you to go to www.soulwisesolutions.com. Go get your autographed copy of the book because it's worth it, and it's for a good cause, but it's also a good read. And I said, get social with, because I feel like, is Shauna probably on a lot of your social media stuff? Is that probably?
Yeah.
So get social.
So we have Soulwise Team is the handle. Like you said, it was hard to try to figure out to get it all consistent, but especially on TikTok and on Instagram, Soulwise Team seems to be where a lot of the really interesting discussions are taking place. So
there you go. So
we would love it.
Social with you, you're getting social with Shauna, so it works out good. So everybody, make sure you follow on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and X Soulwise Team. That's pretty straightforward. Go get the book at soulwisesolutions.com. And again, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to stop in and chat with the M.A.Y.A and I hope you guys are all going to step up and go buy this book. Okay.
And thank you so much, M.A.Y.A. You're so passionate, informed, just so incredibly just compassionate. I love it. Thank you.
Yes, you're highly motivating. I look forward to the day when I get to say, "Oh, I'm Dr. M.A.Y.A too." You are so motivating and inspirational. Hopefully, this time next year we'll be saying that. I'm looking forward to it. But yes, your passion and your purpose. These are the stories that I wanted to share with people. So again, we'll probably have you on at another time to talk about something else because you're highly informative, and I love your energy. Good stuff.
I would love it, and likewise, it's been a total pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming on, everybody. That is Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison. Like I said, make sure you follow Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and X at Soulwise Team. Make sure also you get the book. Go to soulwisesolutions.com and purchase your autographed copy, not just the book. Get an autographed copy of the book and share the story with other people. So this was episode 72. We're just chugging along here. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Share it because I think the story is so worth sharing with so many people because it is so, so important. So make sure, everybody, that you are out there sharing the story. Make sure you tune in, though. We're going to keep the conversation about being ambitious on the table next Saturday, which is the 13th. Well, this month is already flying by at 2 p.m. We're going to have on our next guest. It'll be the 6th guest actually on the show. Ron Sowers, who is an ADHD advocate coach, and he's the host of Don't mind me. I just have ADHD. And I feel like anybody who probably has ADHD realistically probably can relate to that. Like, yeah, my forgetfulness, just all kinds of stuff. So going to give some great insight because, one of the things that people talk about right now is the diagnosis for ADHD, along with autism, is rising exponentially, it seems like. And to have someone kind of speak to it from an adult perspective, because I met so many people that were not diagnosed to adulthood, and they're like, wow, how this changed my life when I realized what was going on. My neurodivergent, is a better way to talk about it. They like to be neurodivergent. You know how that is. So make sure for sure you tune in next week when we have on Ron Bowers talking about ADHD. It's going to be another amazing show as well. Well, everyone, thank you for listening to this episode. As I said, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help you to identify your ambition, harness that motivation, to help you acquire the success and satisfaction you seek in your everyday life. I want you to think about every day, not like the future down the road. Every day, I want you to think about how you can grow and get that life you want. So remember, episodes can be found on Apple and iTunes, as well as Google Podcast. There is Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio. These are all ways that you can find, the M.A.Y.A podcast. Of course, the easy thing to do is just go to www.maya-speaks.com, and you can find everything there as well to make it easy. So make sure you subscribe and that you share and all that good stuff, these episodes with other, because I say, even if, let's say, you listen to an episode and it doesn't do something for you, it doesn't mean there's not somebody else that could benefit from the information too. So subscribe and share, all the M.A.Y.A speaks to you. Like I told you, I finally got my act together on my shared platforms. So make sure you do that as well. But get social. X, Instagram, Facebook, the whole 9 yards right there. M.A.Y.A speaks to you. It's all good stuff. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode. And I always end it with my saying that people kind of scratch their heads and go, Until next time, everyone, remember your present becomes your past and your future is no more. I stole that from Pearl Jam. It's not me. So make the most of every day. Everybody be well, stay safe. And of course, you're all my listeners. So I think you're all absolutely amazing. I will see you all next Saturday. Have a good one. Ciao.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.